And we start in North America, where the state of Georgia in the United States will be among the first territories in the country to reopen their economy. The announcement by the state's Republican governor comes as some U.S. states look to start reopening their own coronavirus-battered economies amid protests from supporters of President Donald Trump, anxious to get back to work. Several other states, including Ohio, Michigan, Texas, and Florida, have said that they aim to reopen parts of their economies soon.
Given the favorable data, enhanced testing, and approval of our healthcare professionals, we will allow gyms, fitness centers, bowling alleys, body art studios, barbers, cosmetologists, hair designers, nail care artists, estheticians, their respective schools, and massage therapists to reopen their doors this Friday, April the 24th. Subject to the specific social distancing and sanitation mandates, theaters, private social clubs, and restaurant dine-in services will be allowed to reopen on Monday, April the 27th.
At least 20 states have now seen rallies against what many protests are calling government overreach amidst tough economic conditions, with more than 22 million jobless claims in the country over the last month. These were some of the views of protesters in Washington's state capital of Olympia this past weekend.
I really feel that our governor is overstepping his authority on this shutdown proclamation, and he's really hurting our economy. And I really think it's unfortunate that a lot of our businesses in the state are unable to operate.
I'm concerned, but it's been politicized. This is a tool now. This is a tool to keep us at home and on house arrest. We're not on house arrest. We've been asked to social distance. We can wear our masks. We can stay distance from people. I'm not on house arrest. I refuse. I walk out of my house now.
Our best defense is a healthy immune system, and I take care of my body. I eat the right food, I take vitamins, I drink the right water. Vitamin D, vitamin C, it's been proven already. So we have everything that we need. We don't need a vaccine. You know, my body, my choice. I take care of myself. I should be able to have the freedoms to go out and do my work, my business, my job, take care of my family.
All right, and for more on this and other developments in the United States, our New York-based correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease joins us. Sherwin, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I've got to say, a bit gobsmacked with what I've just heard, but we'll talk about that now. But it does seem that Georgia, in many ways, is the horse that's already bolted. What are the implications of this and other states that are aiming to follow suit in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, Georgia and a number of other Republican-run states are essentially going to be the guinea pig here, Peter, in terms of, whether these reopenings work or not. The public health officials that have been advising on the reopening guidelines that were issued by President Trump from the White House, the federal guidelines, talk about a 2-week period, a downward trajectory in terms of hospitalizations, intubations, the need for ICU beds, and the death toll. And unfortunately, in states like Georgia that are bolting here, we have seen in the last 24 hours a death rate that is up 14% and an infection rate that is up 7% in just the last 24 hours. In fact, a number of the mayors of big metros in the state of Georgia, the likes of Augusta and Atlanta, which is the big city, they say they were blindsided by the governor's decision to reopen parts of the economy. And look, they are doing it in a staggered way. There will still be social distancing. When you talk about restaurants reopening in the state of Georgia on Monday, they will only have to have about 20% capacity in terms of customers that are allowed in the restaurant at a certain time. So it is a staggered approach here, but it was supposed to be based on a 2-week trajectory based on the federal guidelines. And we are not seeing that 2-week decline in those data points that the federal government has called for yet. And of course, mixed messaging coming from President Trump, egging on these supporters, these protesters that have taken to the streets in various state capitals.
Sherwin, we're also seeing growing pockets of protests across multiple states against these lockdown measures, engaged by engaged on by none other than President Trump himself. How's this complicating the decisions that the governors have to make in their respective states?
Look, whether you're a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, Peter, the goal is to reopen the states, right? The goal, even in the epicenter of New York that has been hardest hit here, is to open up in a way that is going to ensure the safety of citizens. It's going to ensure predictability in terms of surveillance, the ability to trace and test. Let's listen to what the chairperson of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, Vice President Mike Pence, had to say in terms of what they see as necessary when states reopen their economies.
We really believe that states that meet the criteria of 14 days of cases going down and proper hospital capacity, if they test people that have symptoms, and if they deploy resources to vulnerable populations, nursing homes and other designated vulnerable populations where we believe the threat of serious outcomes from the coronavirus is real. Then we also today inform the governors that we will be deploying CDC teams to every state and every territory in the country to assist them in contact tracing.
Contact tracing, Peter, the ability to surveil and to follow people. If you're infected and you come into contact with 3 to 10 people, you need a staff complement, capacity to be able to trace those other individuals and monitor their conditions so that you stay on top of where the virus is as opposed to where it's not. And unfortunately, the lack of social distancing and the lack of protective equipment that protesters are seen in those pictures not adhering to is very, very dangerous in terms of what the public health officials have been saying, the likes of Dr. Birx, the likes of Dr. Fauci, that have said, if you jump the gun here, we talk about the horse bolting, if you jump the gun here and you see a spike in cases, you are then undermining the entire trajectory of the staggered opening that has been envisioned by these guidelines. So you could actually then have to backtrack, go back to a pre-phase 1 social distancing measure and undermine the entire process. So the mixed messages you're getting from the president down to local officials is very confusing for people on the ground.
Well, talking about the president overnight tweeted late last night that he would temporarily block immigration to the United States. What's the reasoning behind this latest move?
Yeah, I'm just going to read that tweet to you. It's on your screen right now. In light of the attack from the invisible enemy, as well as the need to protect jobs, signed an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration into the United States. Look, the president, Peter, did his daily press briefing from the White House last evening. There was no mention about a new ban on immigration, temporary or not, during that press briefing. And at about 10 p.m. last night, the president then tweeted what we suspect was, based on him watching some late-night cable news television channel and really going again for one of the old canards here in terms of his political narrative in the United States. Of course, never forgetting that we are in an election here, talking now about issuing an executive order to block all immigration, the possibility of green card holder applications being suspended, work visas being suspended into the United States. We have not received the detail in terms of this new policy from the White House. So we're still waiting to hear from the details. We imagine a number of White House staff now scrambling to formulate a policy based on this random tweet that the president issued last night.
Yeah, Sherwin, I think you've raised an important issue there. And a lot of people might be watching this and saying that the president is conflating opportunistically this political play out in terms of the election that's on the horizon. I mean, we even hear threats that he might even delay the elections because of COVID-19.
I haven't heard too much about delaying an election. Our understanding is they might look more at mailing in ballots, which is a big political football here. But in terms of the election being suspended or postponed, I haven't heard anything substantial around that, Peter. But also the president tweeting late last week, liberate Minnesota, liberate Virginia, liberate Michigan, all Democratic run governments that are implementing the federal guidelines guidelines in terms of social distancing. So, you know, we were wondering why would he issue those tweets? And then again, this immigration tweet, the president's numbers in terms of popularity and approval in terms of the White House response to this pandemic has suffered in the last 10 days. His poll numbers are sinking. And what you are beginning to see are those old political ploys in terms of talking about immigration. Last night at the briefing, it was talking about the success in building the border wall between Mexico and the United States in a coronavirus briefing, Peter. This was what he was talking about. So it's very clear that the president is speaking to his base yet. He needs to kick in the levels of support from the stalwart supporters that have been with him every step of the way since he took office here, and you know, giving them the red meat they desire: immigration, building a border wall, and you know, let's liberate states that are run by democratic governments.
All right, I don't want to be too cynical, but some people might say that he's literally gambling with people's lives, because if he liberates these states, inverted commas, and this virus kicks back, that possibly might be just one gamble too far.
Yeah, one of the questions in that briefing yesterday was, you know, if you're going to push for the reopening of states, will you then be responsible and held liable if things go south? And, you know, he said he would need to check on a sort of legal opinion as to who would be responsible there. But in terms of responses from Democratic governors, Peter, the governor, Jay Inslee of Washington State, you'll remember Washington State at the beginning of this crisis in the U.S. was the epicenter. He called the presidents, and he referred to them as unhinged rantings that could lead to violence. The president of the United States is basically encouraging insubordination against the laws that are in place to protect people. So you're seeing this dichotomy between what local governments are saying and what the federal government is seeking to achieve. And it's going to be a real test to see what happens in Georgia, given the fact that we haven't seen a downward trajectory. In fact, we've seen a spike in the number of infections and the number of infections and deaths. And if that continues, that's going to undermine the entire process of reopening.
All right, Sherwin, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. As always, your insights are greatly appreciated. That's Sherwin Bryce-Pease, our New York correspondent, speaking to us about developments in the US, particularly around COVID-19 and President